Today, I'm going to explore the link between trauma, chronic stress, and binge eating. This is a personal experience for me as well as a clinical and professional one. I've worked with binge eating, I've worked with trauma, I've worked with chronic stress for probably 15 years now. And the first place, I should say, the first step I took toward understanding this was my own experience of binge eating, which began at a very young age. So young, I can't really even track, but I know it was in grade school. And it lasted up until my maybe 30, 31 years old. So just 5 or 6 years ago is when I really stopped binge eating. There's a correlation between stress, trauma, and binge eating that I think is important to explore so you have some, let's say, like sophisticated understanding of why your body, why your behavior expresses in this way toward food. That it's not so much about willpower, it's not so much about a character flaw, it's not even about you being weak or lazy or indulgent. It's actually about trying to change your chemistry. And food is the quickest way to do that. So let's talk about it. I'll start by explaining my trauma history a little bit so you can understand through my story how I developed a binge eating response, and it just became a habitual way to try to regulate my emotions and even physical states of pain. I was born with an intersex condition, an expression that caused my body to be dominated by estrogen until around age 14, 15. And this estrogen dominance caused me to develop breast tissue, wider hips, a very, very feminine disposition, and I was incapable of putting on muscles or getting rid of weight. Everything I ate turned into fat, and my body stored it. It was really difficult to be a boy and to be growing breasts and to have wider hips and to feel really feminine and feel very female. I had gender dysphoria and even more apt sex dysphoria because the development of breast tissue was at odds with my genitals. So I was really confused. So at first, my genitals were a source of extreme discomfort and, let's say, disappointment, because without them, I felt very female. But then as I was developing more through puberty, and especially around 14, 15, when more testosterone started being produced or received, I still don't really know what happened in my body. I started developing and maturing my genitals more, feeling more like a boy, yet still having these growing breasts. So then my breasts became a source of my dysphoria and discontent. What was worse than that was how my peers treated me. Imagine being a boy in grade school, middle school, and high school with breasts. It was really shocking when they would see me change in the gym class, and I was getting pummeled in the hallways. I was getting bullied everywhere I went, and I was being so harassed, so endlessly harassed, that a teacher had to escort me from one classroom to the next because the school was concerned for my safety. Amidst all this, I had 3 consecutive experiences of sexual assault, which were highly traumatic and left me filled with shame and disgust and self-hatred. Because when you're young and that kind of thing happens to you, you tend to internalize it as something you did wrong. So I didn't see this as an issue with the other people who assaulted me. I saw it with, what did I do to get here? How did I make this happen? What's wrong with me? So the sexual assault, being at odds with my body, and being harassed everywhere I went in school just caused me to collapse in on myself. And what we have to understand about chronic stress and trauma is the biology of them. Chronic stress and trauma have a very similar biology. The only real difference is trauma is what happens when your body can't repair from the chronic stress, when your body can't metabolize it. But what's the it I'm talking about? This is the actual physiology, the biochemistry of stress. More adrenaline, higher blood pressure, an increased heart rate, more muscle tension, and much more neuroactivity, a charge and electricity and excitement that runs through the nervous system and the brain. It's what leads us feeling jittery, anxious, panicky, and alert. This is meant to be a temporary state when we're in a stress response, because whenever we're in a stress response, it means our bodies are responding to a stressful experience or situation. Sometimes a threat response means the body's responding to possible or potential threat to life. The response is meant to be temporary. Same thing I said before. The adrenal glands are stimulated, adrenaline is created. It's going into or released and going into the bloodstream. It heightens neuroactivity, so neurotransmission turns on, dopamine. You get really clear and focused and alert. Your heart rate increases. Sometimes your breathing increases, or sometimes it gets shallow, depending on the experience. But the body gets activated and ready to go into fight or flight. It wants to do something about the stress or the potential or actual threat. And like I said, it's meant to be short term. So there's a dog barking in the yard. It's attached to a leash. Suddenly the leash breaks, the dog is chasing me. My body floods with adrenaline to make me run or to hit the dog or to scream for help or somehow save myself from the situation. When that state remains turned on, like it's over, I escaped, but I haven't caught up to it, or the dog injured me pretty severely and I went into a freeze response and I shut down, and that physiology of alertness stays alive and never quite goes back to that baseline before the dog attacked me or barked at me, that's when we're entering into a traumatized system, meaning the system stays alert and enlivened by excessive amounts of adrenaline and neuroactivity, neurotransmission. So your body goes into a hormonal experience of aliveness, which is an interesting term to use because when you have panic, you don't think of it as aliveness. You think of it as exhaustion and fatigue and overwhelm and pain and suffering. And it is all those things too. But it's because of the ongoing aliveness, the alertness. Adrenaline makes us alive. It activates us to be ready and focused and narrow-minded on survival. So when we're stuck in a traumatized state, when we're experiencing chronic stress that never quite repairs, or a certain experience was way too much for our system to process, we stay in that alertness, in that aliveness, and that runs the body ragged. So that's part of the biochemistry, the physicality, the biology of stress and trauma. Where does binge eating come in here? Well, what's fascinating about food is food also deeply, quickly impacts our biology. It has a huge influence on our neurotransmission, on our hormonal productions, on heart rate, adrenal stimulation, blood flow. So much shifts based on what kind of foods we're eating. Now, I've categorized foods into three main categories: depressants, stimulants, and balancing foods. They speak for themselves. There are certain foods and food habits that stimulate us and activate us and make us really alert and wake us up. And then there's the balancing foods, the whole foods, that tend to just nourish us where we are and let us feel what we're going through. They also give us more capacity for stress. When you're binge eating, you're usually binging on the depressants. So when I was a binge eater, I was going for chips and cookies and cakes and ice cream and pasta and bread and cheese, really heavy, nutrient-dense foods, not necessarily diverse nutrients, lots of calories, lots of carbohydrates, usually lots of fats, processed foods. Now, the reason why we go toward these foods to comfort us, we call them our comfort foods, is because they're so heavy with fat and calories and carbs that they slow the body down. So if I have this panic from adrenaline and my blood is coming up here and the blood pressure is rising to give me a brain clarity and to put all the energy in this part of my face so I can look how to run away from a situation, for example, this is what happens when we have a panic or anxiety attack. So when we're overwhelmed or living in anxiety or going into panic, we have a heightened amount of blood pressure, a rising of our energy and neurotransmissions coming up the body. We feel that. You can all think of a time where you were overwhelmed or scared or panicked by something or anxious. Something rises to the point where you feel you're going to explode or pass out. Well, guess what comfort foods do? They start grounding that. That blood flow has to redirect itself to the internal organs, the digestive organs, to start putting your energy toward digesting this heavy food. So in that temporary 3 to 5, 6 hours of thwarting your energy toward digesting this dense food, we have a temporary feeling of groundedness, of security, even of numbness, because the food is so rich that we tend to numb out our sensations while, during, and after eating it. And binging itself is dissociative, so we tend to numb out while doing it. This is all very pleasurable when you compare it to the anxious state. Hey, my friends. I created a space that is affordable, accessible, and anyone is allowed to join anytime, and it's called the Library Membership. The Library Membership is an online private platform that hosts dozens of my webinars, my somatic practices, private mini lectures, and movement practices. There's also a monthly sound healing, and you'll be invited to a weekly Tuesday live mini practice with me and other participants. You'll also be invited to be a live audience member in our monthly HLN team podcast recordings, where you'll take place in the Q&A that happens off air after the episode is filmed. For more information on this membership, click on the link below or go to holisticlifenavigation.com and click on membership and then library. You can join right now and you can cancel or pause your subscription at any time. I look forward to seeing you in there. So I was binge eating all through the day. I mean, there wasn't a moment where I wasn't thinking about food or actually eating it, because it was the best way for me to respond to the anxiety I was living with. I didn't know how to talk about what happened to me. I shut down. I was alone with it through most of my development. And being alone with something is one of the primary reasons we become traumatized in the first place. Having co-regulation and witnessing and support while you're moving through something really stressful or traumatic can severely shift the outcome of your nervous system and your ability to repair and recover from the event. I didn't have that. Now, I did have support. I had a very supportive mother. I may have had a couple friends in my life as I went to my later teen years, but I was so good at hiding everything from everybody, I didn't even know there was something to share. It was something that I buried so deeply into my brain that I couldn't dig it out, even to myself. I couldn't witness it. So the best thing I had, my best bet, was food. Food numbed out those sensations and gave me a temporary satisfaction. So binge eating is a direct response to a lot of anxiety and tension and overwhelm, sensationally and even hormonally and biochemically. It changes our chemistry temporarily. Now, what's fascinating about binge eating is the foods we tend to binge on, the processed foods, are usually very, very calorically dense, high in fat, and high in refined carbohydrates. So initially, these foods slow us down and exhaust us because of the high amount of calories and fat. It takes a lot of energy to process them. So it quiets us down for the moment. It soothes the pain and the anxiety. But guess what happens next? Once the fat and the calories are taken care of and metabolizing, there's all this carbohydrate. There's all these calories connected to glucose that get turned, carbs turn into glucose into your bloodstream. So once the carbs are being digested from the fats and your glucose is spiking, you have a blood sugar spike, which causes an insulin spike, which then causes an adrenaline spike. So this food that initially quieted you, calmed you down, made you feel heavy and full and even tired, several hours later will then stimulate your nervous system and create a secondary anxiety, anxious panic response. So not only are we using this food to quell stress response, the food itself, as it metabolizes over a course of several hours, then creates a secondary stress response. So you're just stressing your body out even more without understanding why. And this is what leads to the cycles of binging. This is what leads to compulsive eating, because the food only temporarily quiets me down, and then that same food stimulates me later on. This is also the reason a lot of people wake up in the middle of the night. When you go to bed really late and you're eating right before bed, mid-sleep cycle, your body is going to have an insulin response to all this glucose that's being released into the blood. And that's going to cause an adrenal response, which wakes you up in a kind of panic state. So a lot of people that eat really heavy, dense, carbohydrate-rich foods before bed are usually going to wake up in the middle of the night feeling a little panicked and nervous, even sweating, because your system is being adrenalized from the subsequent glucose spike that occurs when your body processes, metabolizes, and digests refined carbohydrates. So it's important that we have a correlation here, that we connect these pieces together. Stress and trauma are biochemical, they're biological. Food is a very quick way within minutes to change your biology. Binging is a direct response to the imbalanced biology that feels unsafe, panicked, overwhelmed, and stressed. Binging temporarily soothes, slows down, comforts, and numbs the stressed out state, and then creates a secondary stress response. So you're just in a constant cycle of trying to quell and repress the stress, and then the stress coming back, often with a vengeance, because it's the baseline you already had before binging, plus the secondary stress response from the food and the way it digests and metabolizes in your body. So understanding this hopefully starts to give you some cognitive awareness of what your body is doing and why it kind of feels like it's out of your control, because in a way it is. Until you know how to relate to the emotions underneath the binging, it is out of your control. You're not consciously thinking of doing this. Your body is propelling you toward the cabinet to get a hit of these foods that temporarily slows you down. So, cognitively understanding it might be the first step of unshaming it. So, you don't have this kind of mystery of what's wrong with me, but instead you can realize what's right with me. How does it make sense that my body does this? Wow, I feel what Luis is talking about. I can feel how something settles. I can feel how I get activated later and I need the comfort foods again. Understanding this cognitively is the first step of being compassionate while you witness it happen. I'm going to give you a little practice of what to do now that you're aware of it. It's a very simple practice. When you notice yourself craving comfort foods being anything you would eat to fall asleep. So that's the way you can think of it for yourself. You're imagining it, especially after a meal when you know you've already had enough food. I want you to get into a position, a posture where your head can be held. I like to put up my headrest, and your head is held back. Your arms are just softly laying next to you. Your feet are on the ground, or the bottom of your feet are flat on the bed or wherever you're on. And you take a pillow or your hands, you put one hand over your chest, the other hand over your belly, or if you have a pillow, you wrap your arms around that, and you set your alarm for 5 minutes. And for 5 minutes, you sit back, you open your eyes, and you look at something pleasant in the room that helps anchor you to something supportive. It can be a plant, it can be a pet, a person, a photo, whatever it is that feels pleasant. Feel in your body where you feel that pleasant thing. Where is there a softness? Where is there an ease? Where is there some extra air or space to breathe? And stay with that as the alarm is ticking. And what you want to do is notice what's the emotion, what's the state, what's the sensation that's rising, the anxiety, the pain, the discomfort that's propelling you to get food that would quell and numb this out. The more you practice this, you'll be surprised to see how much easier it is for you to sit with these uncomfortable sensations. When you have a practice of binge eating, especially for decades, especially one that starts in childhood, you have been practicing developmentally how to bypass your emotional cues, how to bypass sensations that need you to support them, that need hugs from other people, that need movement, that need to be written out. Sensations that have expressions and instructions for us in order to resolve them. They've been cut off due to the binge eating. So the binge eating is like a soundproof between you and these sensations. The 5-minute timer is just enough time, without getting too overwhelmed by them, to start touching into being with them. See what they have to say, see what they need, see what emotions spill forward. And then, when the timer goes off, see how you respond, how you interact, how you relate to the food you were going to binge on. Let's say it's a bag of chips. Maybe you don't want the chips anymore because now you're in touch with the underlying emotion. Maybe you still want the chips, but you don't eat as many. Maybe you go and eat just as many chips as you would before. At least you have a conscious awareness of what's underneath that craving and why it's there and that it needs your support and attention, whether you stop binging or not. Start here, see where this takes you, and let me know in the comments below what you find out, any questions you have, and even your own wisdom that might emerge. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching today's episode. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next.